Whoops, there are people popping in. Emily comes by way of request. Emily is...
Wait, before you start, sorry, Shirley, just mentioned that we're recording this. I started it. So.
Oh, that was a little bing. You remembered. I didn't. We're recording this, so for people who are trying to put their kids to sleep and want to watch it another time, we can do that. And Emily is not only a certified sleep consultant, she is also a parent at the preschool and comes to us by way of request because a number of the preschool parents said, can we get Emily here because being locked in and our schedules are falling off, it's getting harder and harder to maintain the kind of structure we had before. And so I see Sarah here. Sarah talked earlier about parenting during this period. And now Emily's going to focus in on how we get some rest, because if we don't, this becomes even more stressful. So with that, Emily, I turn it over to you and let you get started.
Sounds great. Alex? Are we getting started?
Yep.
Are we getting started now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize everybody was in. Okay, awesome.
Yeah, and people are coming in, and I'm getting messages like I'm putting Julia to sleep. I'll be in soon.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good. All right. Well, thank you all for joining tonight. Though, as Shirley hinted at, if you're joining, it means you're probably not getting the best night's sleep. So that is what I'm here to help you with. I'm going to, as Shirley mentioned too, just kind of set up some basics, some tips, so that at the very least, if you don't have any questions or aren't one to raise your hand, you feel like you've got some good tips to go on your way. We'll talk about primarily preschoolers. So as many of you know me as Sully's mom, so that's my little guy. He's 3.5, and so I know a lot of our kiddos are in preschool, and so we'll talk about that. But when we get to the Q&A session, if you have any questions on infant sleep, on older kiddos sleep, and adult sleep, which I'll touch on as well, because I know there are a lot of us that aren't sleeping as well also. We'll talk about that. But what we're going to jump into first are those tips. So what I always start with when I'm working with families are those most important sleep tips. What things should you keep in mind above all else when you're working with your kiddos and trying to make sure that they get those restful night's sleep? The very first thing that I always look at are what I call external sleep props. So if you're seeing issues with sleep, a lot of times there can be an external sleep prop. What do I mean by external sleep prop? It is anything that, we have external sleep props, but anything that a child or anyone uses to get themselves to sleep. So if your child is needing to be held to sleep or slept with, or any of those things that maybe that they're using to get themselves to sleep, it can impede their ability to sleep overnight. So when I'm working with families, I usually help and focus on getting that independent sleep. So falling asleep completely on their own and sleeping completely through the night. So removing those sleep props can be a huge help. That's probably the hardest thing to do. So I say it first so we can say it and then move on, because especially right now, as we talked about, our kids can be anxious, there can be worries, there can be things that they might need a little bit more from us, and they may have had independent sleep before and may have regressed a little bit, and that's okay. But always keeping that in the back of your mind, that that's kind of your end goal, is for them to fall asleep independently, means that as they fall asleep, they have everything they need to get themselves back to sleep should they wake up in the middle of the night, right? If a lot of times if a kiddo is falling asleep with something, then when they wake up, they need that thing again in order to get themselves back to sleep. So that can a lot of times be where we see those multiple wakings overnight or early mornings. But again, that can be hard when we're going through a lot of changes. And so always keep that in the back of your mind as your end goal. The second thing I want to talk about is being consistent. Again, Shirley touched on this quickly, but we all know that routines, consistency, especially for our preschoolers, but even for ourselves, makes a big difference in how well we sleep. We do better when our body clocks are synced, when they're consistent, when we're able to wake up at the same time every day, when we're able to have a nap or some sort of quiet time or rest time during the day, and then go to bed at a reasonable hour, which I'll talk about too, but having that consistency there. Also treating all sleep situations similarly. So having a 20 to 30 minute bedtime routine where it's very similar. That not only, especially for our preschoolers, tells them that bedtime is coming, but they know what to expect. Right now, there's a lot of stuff going on in their world that they don't understand. They don't know what's going to happen next. They may be nervous about things that are going on. And we don't want bedtime to be that time when they're also feeling inconsistencies. So the more consistent we can be in the ways, the times, and the routines that they have for sleep will help them sleep more soundly overnight. Again, that can be hard depending on our schedules and things like that. But even maintaining just that bedtime routine in the same bedtime can make a really big difference, especially for our preschoolers. The next thing that I always like to talk about and hinted at is going to bed early. This is a really tricky one for our preschoolers because I want them to go to bed really early. When I'm working with families, it's between 6 and 8 p.m. is usually great. 6 o'clock sounds crazy. My 3.5-year-old is in bed by about 6:30 every night, and he just stopped napping, and that's why. So it depends on kind of if your kiddo is napping or not still. If they are still napping during the day, a much later bedtime can be appropriate, 8, 9 o'clock. But even that would, depending on what their kind of daytime schedule looks like, that early bedtime is going to be really important. Even though kiddos in this preschool age drop naps, they still typically need about 11 to 12 hours of sleep at the bare minimum, about 10 hours of sleep. So depending on when you're waking in the morning, that 6 to 8 o'clock bedtime though can be better than you think. So my neighbors all make fun of me when I'm like, well, my kids are in bed. And they're like, it's not even 7. But that early bedtime really can help avoid any overtiredness, which can stimulate our kiddos further and again cause those issues that you might see overnight and some of those early mornings. The bedtime routine we talked about, but it's really important to have that consistency, but it's also important to keep it short. 20 to 30 minutes should be how long your bedtime routine is. We don't want to dawdle on how long we're getting them in bed, but instead making it consistent. I kind of a good example of a bedtime routine is a bath or shower or some sort of kind of calming bathroom, brushing teeth routine, followed by 1 or 2 books, and then into bed. So it should be pretty quick and seamless, but also something that your kiddo can know what's coming next and know kind of the process to get themselves in bed. So that short, consistent routine can make a big difference. And I touched on nap time and quiet time as well. So at this age, most kids stop napping between around 3 and 5 years old. So if you have a kiddo in that age range, they may be dropping their nap, or they may be ready to. You may be keeping that nap and not realize that it's actually time to drop it. So a lot of times if they are older and you're seeing those problems at night, it might be time to drop a nap. If you do drop a nap, it is really important to keep quiet time. I call it quiet time or rest time, but at the very least a half an hour, maybe an hour of just quiet time for your child to sit in their room or in somewhere where it's nice and quiet, where they can look at books, play with small quiet toys, but just have that kind of rest downtime, not necessarily watching TV, which I think we all know a lot of us parents have thrown the screen time rules out the window for these last 3 months, me included. But we still make sure that we have that quiet time where it is time for them to just rest their bodies and relax, especially if they're not napping during the day. So respecting that time is important. The next thing, 2 things I'm going to talk about are, again, these kind of basic tips, but not skipping that nap time or quiet time. So making sure that they have that time to rest, because children that do not have that nap time or downtime do see those issues. So a lot of times we'll see inconsistencies, which every family I work with, I think, gets sick of the word consistent that I use. Like, be consistent, but those inconsistencies really can cause some issues. So if they're taking a nap, making sure that nap is about the same time every day. There is a small 5-minute routine before it happens. They're able to take a nap, or similarly for quiet time, maybe some sort of small setup for them that's consistent. They have that quiet time. And not skipping it, so that they have that same thing every single day, whether it's a weekday or a weekend. And then the last basic tip for our kiddos is making a picture chart for their routine. I know we saw a lot of people in the beginning of this pandemic that were creating massive schedules that they were following all day long, and it can seem a little crazy, and most of those have probably gone out the window. I created one. I didn't show it to my child. I created another one. He didn't even look at it. But having some sort of very basic picture chart can make a big difference. It doesn't have to be those big, gigantic, timed out schedules that we have for our kiddos, but just something that very quickly says, in the morning we get up, we brush our teeth, then we have breakfast, then we play outside, then we do these things. Again, not necessarily to a clock, but just something that they can then see what's coming next. And that is a segue for me into what we can also do specifically for the times that we're in now, right? So during this pandemic, the reason why we want to have things like a picture chart and that consistency that I've talked about so much is because of the concerns and the worries and the things that may be plaguing our children that we don't even realize, right? Or we do realize, but we're not sure how to talk to them about. The more consistent we can be with them, it gives them that ability to know what's coming next, as I've already talked about. But similarly with the routine, they're able to say, okay, if I feel insecure in what's happening in my day and I have these anxieties and these worries, I know I can at least look at this chart and know what's coming next. I know how many more things before snack time, or I know how many more things we might do before dinner. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be all completely drawn out, but having that idea of giving them those boundaries, giving them that structure and that consistency will help ease some of that anxiety so that they don't have that to deal with that overnight. How are we doing, Shirley? Any questions or anything that we should?
Anything yet?
Okay.
But you said something very quickly, and I want to come back to it. And again, if there are questions, raise your hand, put it in the chat. Do I see a question, Monique? You want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Sure. Do I have
ahead.
a question? Maybe it came out by mistake, but sure.
Oh, maybe it was Melanie. Did Melanie have a question? You're both.
I think Melanie did, yeah.
Oh, okay. No problem.
Do you want to have one too, or?
No, let Melody go, and then I'll ask. Maybe she has my question, so no problem.
Okay. Thanks.
Melanie, you might be muted.
Yeah, she's okay now. But I can't hear you.
She's not, so I don't know what's going on.
She could type her question in too.
Melanie, can you put your question in the chat box?
Thank you.
Okay, here it comes. She said she's going to log out and come back in. Okay. And then she'll ask her question. While we're waiting for her, you said something that was counterintuitive. I want to go back to it. You said if the child doesn't rest during the day, it's harder to get the child to sleep later on. Now, you know, I remember the old strategy of I'm going to keep him up for 12 hours because he might finally fall asleep. But I think what you're saying is something that's different.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I'll touch on that quickly because a lot of times we do think we'll just run them rampant all day long. If I just keep them outside and keep them going, then they'll sleep like a rock. Some kids that may work for. The majority of kids, what I see is that they're so overstimulated and so overtired by the time they get to bed that they can't settle down. So you have a hard time with bedtime initially. They have a hard time falling asleep. And then even if they fall asleep really quickly because they're so tired,
Right.
the way that their systems were stimulated throughout the day causes them to wake up overnight. Because again, they have all of that stimulation that's happening throughout the day. They're such little people that they need that rest time. They need the time for their bodies to actually sit down, take a step back, and just rest. When Sully does his quiet time, sometimes he's literally just rolling on the floor, sucking his thumb. And so, and I'm like, you okay? He's like, yeah, I'm just resting. And I'm like, okay. He doesn't want to sleep, but he doesn't really want to play, but he needs that time, that downtime to just be by himself. And that can make a really big difference for how they sleep overnight.
That's great. Lynn Rubin said her kids were like that. And Melanie's back, so we'll let you go with your question, Melanie.
Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Yeah.
All right. Hi, I'm Melanie. I have a 3-year-old and a 15-month-old, and we've been really consistent with the schedule, with the sleep, with all the pieces. And my 3-year-old has stuck to his schedule, no problem. Our 15-month-old is a wildly different ballgame. We just after she turned 1, we dropped her morning nap because both of her naps were so short that the doctor had said, maybe consolidate and you'll get a real second nap. And for about a week we did. And now she sleeps 7:30 to 5:15 a.m. And then she takes a 1-hour nap. And we've tried moving her nap up to see if she's overtired. Nothing we seem to do is getting her enough sleep.
What time is her nap?
Right now it's at 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock for an hour?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's funny, I'm in the same boat. So I have a 3.5-year-old and a 16-month-old. So we have the same children. And we also dropped our little one's nap right when he turned 1. So I know the battle, because the one nap transition is a really, really tough one. I have always told parents it's dropping to one nap and dropping the nap altogether. But honestly, dropping the nap altogether has been fine. One nap was hard for my older one, and it's harder for this younger one too. So it does take time. If she's 15 months old, though, it sounds like you've been doing this for about 3 months pretty consistently. Mm-hmm. So what's good is you should be getting around the bends there, because it can take anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks. So it very well could just be that she's taking a long time. But in what I'm hearing, 1 to 2 o'clock, I would try, and it sounds like you have tried it. What time is she waking up in the morning?
5:15.
Oh, 5:15, right. Yeah, so she's got a lot of time before her nap. And I know you said you tried earlier, but I would even try a little bit earlier and see if it makes a difference. Try it again and be consistent. So a good one nap schedule is usually, if they're waking up around 6 or 7, having about 5 to 6 hours of awake time. So it usually ends up being around 12 or 12:30 is a good time for one nap. When she's waking up that early, you might want to push it up even earlier while you're trying, and see if you did 11 or 11:30, what happens. It still may only be an hour, and it still may mean a really early bedtime for a while. That 6 o'clock bedtime, 6:30. But if you're consistent in that, then you'll start to be able to push it up by about 30 minutes.
Do you think if she goes to bed at 6:30, she's going to start waking up in the 4s? Because I can't do that.
A lot of times they don't. Most kids do not. Not every kid, but most kids still will sleep until the time that they were sleeping for. So even if she still wakes up at 5 o'clock, she's getting 11 hours
More
of sleep versus, right. And
Okay.
that helps, because right now what's likely happening is she has a sleep debt, right? So she's not getting enough sleep during the day because she's still taking the short nap, which, as a side note, a 1 hour nap is still a good nap. It sounds crazy when they went from 2 naps, maybe 3 or 4 hours of sleep, to 1 hour. It seems like it could never be a good nap. But one nap is still a good, or 1 hour nap is still a good nap, because it's restorative. It's at least one sleep cycle. And that will lengthen with time.
If you put her down at 11:30 noon, would you give her lunch before that?
Yeah. So if you're doing 11:30 or noon, I would do lunch right before and then straight to nap. It's kind of like straight out of the high chair into the nap. And no time to kind of play or anything in between that, and see how she does. And then just be consistent for about 2 weeks. Because it takes a long time to get them on track. So that the age is tricky. I'm right there with you. Mine is the opposite. He'll take all the naps he needs, but he will still wake up in the morning. So we're working on our mornings.
So
Thank you.
I love the concept, but before we go a little any further, I'm going to introduce. There's a baby on, and that's Linda Ariel's grandbaby. Linda is up there, and that's Linda's daughter-in-law's son. That Elena
Hello.
Jacobs. So,
Hello, little baby.
sleep is doing. So they're listening, but she seems awake right now. But they're in Denver, so.
Oh, I'm from Denver originally, born in Denver. So glad to have you on the call.
You just introduced a concept, I think, that might be of interest to all of us. And you said the baby has a sleep debt. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Can you speak to, I don't think of sleep as a bank, but that's what you're describing.
Yeah, it is. And a lot of kids, especially children, adults have less of the ability to really build up a sleep debt, but they still do. But especially our kiddos, they need, let's say a 1 to 2 year old, like we're talking about with Melanie's little girl, they need on average about 11 to 14 hours of total sleep during the day. Wow. That's the National Sleep Foundation. So some require a little less, some can be a little more, but 11 to 14 hours total is what they're looking for. And every kid has their own kind of total, right? So Melanie's daughter may actually need 12 hours of total sleep during the day. And if she's not getting that, she will build those hours up, right? So her body will be like, well, I missed an hour yesterday, I missed an hour then. And so that'll start to build up, and that's where you see those issues compound. And so that's why, while I'm telling her, you may need that early bedtime and you may need to move your nap earlier, she may be getting more sleep overall, even if the timing is still a little off, until she starts to reduce that sleep debt so that she is not overtired, but is able to get well rested. And then the timing becomes a little bit more flexible because she's not working off of that debt, if that makes sense.
Got it. So why don't you just go ahead with what you had, and then we'll see if there are other questions that come up.
Okay, awesome. So I was going to talk again, just a few last things on pandemic times and with our kiddos and that anxiety. So if you have, especially preschoolers who are dealing with any sort of concerns or worries, make sure you're talking to them. I know we probably all are, but some of us may not be as much as we think we are, right? We may be trying to hide them from some of the things that are going on. But we want to talk to them about what's bothering them. We want to make sure that they're dealing with the things that they're kind of thinking about. So especially during the day is what I should highlight there. Talk to them during the day, because when we start to wait until bedtime and then we bring up these things, or they bring them up, or they're having a hard time falling asleep and they call for mom, and then you come in and now they want to talk about their worries. Those things do come out at night. And that's where you'll see those issues. So talk to them as much as you can during the day. Tell them about what's going on, how we're all keeping each other safe, how we're taking precautions for ourselves, for others, how businesses are taking those precautions, how everybody's starting to open up again. My son has loved those conversations. Is everybody feeling better now? Are things starting to open? Or things? And he likes to hear that, and he likes to be involved, and talking to them can really make a big difference. There are also 3 other things that I really like to do with toddlers, especially if they're struggling with any sort of anxiety issues, which I guess is very common right now. And those are deep breathing. So any sort of breathing exercises. If you're interested, contact me, and I have a full sheet of different breathing exercises that you can do with your toddlers that are really fun, like smelling the roses, and breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth, that type of stuff that makes it fun for kids. Nidra yoga. So doing different yoga moves with our children just helps them relax, helps them feel centered, helps them understand a little bit more about themselves, as well as affirmations. We want them to know how bold and smart and beautiful and all of those things that they are. And the more we have them say those things, the more that confident they will be in themselves, and a confident child will sleep better because they know they can do it, and they know they can do it on their own. So those are 3 really great things to practice with our children, especially those that struggle with any sort of anxiety. There are also 2, yep, go ahead, Shirley.
No, go ahead.
2 books. If you have a child that's struggling at all with anxiety, I Am Peace and Ruby Finds a Worry are 2 of my favorites. Actually, on my team have a librarian who was like, make sure that when you're talking to them tonight, you tell them about those 2 books because they are great for this time. So again, I Am Peace and Ruby Finds a Worry, great books for your kids. Books just create a great entry point to talk to our kids about the things that they're struggling with, and help bring those conversations up a little bit more naturally. And the very last thing on our kiddos during these times is outside time. So making sure that they are getting that outside time. At the very minimum, I say twice a day, morning and afternoon, for at least 30 minutes at a time. A good schedule, if you're doing about a 7 a.m. wake up, a 10 to 11 outside time, and again, 3 to 4. Really awesome to be outside, getting that sunshine, getting that vitamin D, and doing something active. We had the sprinklers under the trampoline today, which was a lot of fun. It was very wet, but it was a lot of fun. But that outside activity and that outside time can really help burn that energy, and the vitamin D helps to set our body's melatonin levels. Melatonin is the hormone that we secrete that tells us when and it's time to sleep. And so when we're getting that vitamin D that we need, when we're getting that active play, we and our kids will fall asleep more easily and sleep better at night. Okay. We can pause again for questions, or I can go over a few more. I can just keep talking. It's really up to you guys what you want to do. I know we're at 8:30.
Hang on, let me see.
Oh, and I know Monique had a question.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I don't have, oh, Lynn, I have Lynn's, and then we'll go to Monique. But Lynn, do you want to talk about this, or shall I just read your comment here?
Hi, everybody. No, you were talking, Emily, about anxiety and having conversations with your kids. And my 8-year-old's imaginary friend who lives on another planet was sick with COVID-19. That came from him, though. So that opened up a whole lot of conversations about, not that you can get your kids to tell you about their imaginary friends, but he did. And we had a lot of deep conversations around, how to stay healthy, how to help someone who's sick, how to get through that. So I just thought I'd share that, that was our way in to his anxiety.
It's great.
That's a really, really great point.
And Monique, I cut you off, and you're very impressively cleaning. I think you've done very well multitasking.
Oh, story of my life, and there's no other way. Thanks. So you might know my son Raphael. He's at Shomrei. He's 4 now, almost 4.5. I struggle a lot with him on many different things. Not his fault. I guess my fault of dealing with it. And I know I have to put a routine together, and I'm wondering what's the best way to change the routine? I basically need more routine to start, and I need to change it. So, we had a sleep coach, a while ago, like a year and a half ago or so, and that's kind of out the window now. Of course, he's older, so things are different. In other words, she told us, like, roll, for certain things, roll bedtime back like 15 minutes at a time. So should we do that? Is it an incremental change, or should we just do like okay, that's it, now we're going to bed, going to sleep at like 7, as opposed to we try and get him into bed by 7:30, but sometimes he's rolling around till 8:30, 9 o'clock, 9:15, 9:45. I mean, he is quite hyper. He has some issues with self-regulation. He has he's going into Shomrei in another school, and he has some PT and OT help. It's borderline. It's not like severe, but I'm pretty hyper. I'm super high energy. I know where he gets it from. But yeah, so it's like, I know I have to do routine. Do I do a sudden shift or roll it back little by little, and I'm also not sure what's appropriate for almost a 4.5-year-old, the right timing of things either.
Is he still napping by any chance?
Sometimes, yes, and we dropped naps. We were potty training. Everything was, quite going pretty well. But now, of course, we're in COVID times. And so he's regressed. He started peeing and pooping like the first couple of days. It was like I changed his underwear like 10 or 12 times. I was like, oh, my God, I can't do this. And we put him in back to pull-ups and diapers. And then my husband's like, now he's like, let's do it again since it's been a few months. So it's kind of back and forth and back and forth. It must be confusing, the poor guy, but we really don't know what to do, I guess.
Yeah, and that's I think a lot of parents are in the same place, right? We don't know what to do because this is new to everybody. Yeah. So that's very honest, and I think what you can do, if you're already putting him to bed at 7:30ish, like you said, I think but he's taking until 9 or 9:15. If he's 4.5, he may just need a little bit less sleep, especially if he dropped the nap a while ago.
Well, he's napping again now. He started napping again because it seems like he's out of control. So sometimes that's the thing; it's not consistent. Some days it seems like a nap he really needs, like, oh my God, we just got to get him down. Other times it's like he seems okay. So I have to admit, we're not consistent with the naps. I try not to do it past 1:30, like 1:30, 2:30. Generally, no more than an hour. On occasion, it's been longer, but generally within 45 minutes, he'll wake up on his own, and I feel good about that. I'm like, okay, that's enough. I try not to let him go past that because I feel like when he was younger, it was like 1 till 3 when he was like 2.5 years old. But now at 4.5, that seems way too long. There's no way.
Yeah, I would say instead of capping it at about an hour, if he does nap, if he wakes up on his own, it's fine. But if he's still sleeping, I'd let him go at least an hour and a half, because it's 2 full sleep cycles. So either 45 minutes is about a sleep cycle. And so that's probably why you're seeing him wake up after 45 minutes.
Okay.
So what can happen is when you wake a kiddo at an hour, especially if you're waking him up, it can almost make him super grumpy, have kind of a weird afternoon because he was just startled out of a really deep sleep. So if he is going to nap, then I would let it be at least an hour and a half, and try to do it early if you can. So but when I've been going back and forth for this entire time with my son's nap too.
Right.
He's officially dropped it as of a few weeks ago, but we had a solid, 2 months before that where he was back and forth, which can be very common when kiddos are dropping naps. But the earlier you can do it, can just make allow him to get a little bit more activity in before bedtime. So even if you do like a 12:30 to 2 o'clock nap, can be great. So similar to what we were talking about with Melanie, do that lunch and kind of straight to nap time. So give him that lunch, let him take a nap if he's going to nap. And you can even do nap or quiet time at the same time, right? So at 12, let's say he eats lunch at 12, he does his nap or quiet time from 12:30 until 2 o'clock if he's sleeping, or maybe 1 or 1:30 if he's doing just quiet or rest time. If he's having a hard time, don't put too much stress on yourself. Give yourself some grace and how much you have to do with him during the day, right? He is tired, and that's probably where you're seeing some of that hyperness and that overactivity is actually because he's probably tired, right? So keep your afternoons easy and simple. Whatever kind of things he's interested in, and painting, crafting, playing outside is still great, but you don't have to make it super high intense in the afternoon because he probably is tired, especially on those days when he hasn't napped. And then if he has napped, you're probably looking at just a later bedtime, 8:30, 9 o'clock. It can be a much more common time, 9 o'clock probably for an hour and a half nap at 4.5. And if he doesn't nap, then he may need a really early bedtime. He may need that 6:30, 7 o'clock bedtime.
So my question is that okay then? Like, not that there's a sleep police, but to me, I was like, oh no, so nervous. Like, that's not consistent. Oh my God, he has a nap, he doesn't have a nap. To bed at 6, to bed at 8. Oh no, I've screwed it all up. Like, it's so.
You want to try to be consistent.
Right.
So see what works best. Say, give it a few days where you just let him nap. If he seems like he's really exhausted, give him the nap. Do 12:30 to 2. Try that for a week and see how he does. If he's consistently falling asleep and taking that nap and falling asleep easy at bedtime, then it works for you, right? Then you're good. If he's not taking the nap or having a hard time falling asleep for that nap, then switch it to quiet time and do that really early bedtime, and then stay consistent with that bedtime. And for him, the bedtime routine, the consistent and short bedtime routine is going to be important. So 20 to 30 minutes, and then trying some of these other activities we talked about, like deep breathing, nidra yoga, affirmations. Deep breathing is a great one to do at bedtime to really calm kiddos down. A lot of kiddos, I have that be just a part of their bedtime routine when they get in bed. They know how to do it themselves after obviously learning how to do it with mom and dad. And that can just be a great way, one, for them to learn how to get themselves to sleep, but then also to reinforce, and you help him understand that he can do this, is when he wakes up in the middle of the night to practice his deep breathing to help him get back to sleep.
Okay. And so if he doesn't nap, what would be a good time for him? Is like 6:30 to sleep? Really? That sounds okay.
It can be, yeah. At his age, that could be a little bit early if he has, but because he's going back and forth with the nap. When kiddos first drop the nap, a lot of times they do still need that early bedtime.
Okay.
So you would try that.
So Margaret,
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
good luck, Monique. I think
Yes.
she's telling you to do what your child needs.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you. Sorry about this.
Yeah, give yourself some grace. No, you're doing a great job, and it's not easy on anyone. So,
Emily, I think Margot had a question. Margot, there you are. Did you? You have to unmute yourself, Margot.
I think Ayla might be in front of me.
No, you're okay.
But I'm happy to go, but I don't want to cut her.
Oh, does Ayla have a question?
It's okay. You can go first, Margot. I'll go after you.
Okay. Well, I have a 3 and a 6-year-old, and they right now also in this time they want to be on the same schedule. Especially the younger one wants to be on the schedule with the older one, and also before bed, I'm like, let's deep breathe, and they're like, no, let's run, and then they're running around the house, and I mean, that is like really, I'm like, no, how about some yoga? And they're like, no, we're doing something else. They're jumping on the bed, they're running, you know, so then I'm kind of like, all right. And we wrap it up. But I guess I am concerned for both of them that they're not getting enough sleep at night. And they're, you know, my daughter also is in the same boat at 3.5 where she dropped the nap mostly because of COVID, because she wanted to do everything with her brother. And so she had a few times where she would like fall asleep at 6 and then be out for the night. But now I think we're pretty much over the nap, or she'll be like, I'm going, I'm fine. And then we won't see her and she's asleep in bed at 5 o'clock and then she'll wake up. So it's just also a little harder to regulate. So I guess for me, that recentering of like, let's be in quiet time. Sometimes I like take them outside before bed and have a walk or a bike ride. So we're not like running in the house and they get that extra air. But do you have any redirecting techniques for getting them to get to sleep earlier?
What you just said, and I'm not sure there's an echo. Is that me?
That was Monique.
Okay.
We heard
okay,
you.
now. Yep. Okay. I think you just hit on one of my biggest tips, which is give them the outlet to get that energy out a little bit before you get to that bedtime routine, right? So that can be just running around the house and saying, all right, we use a ton of timers in our house, and I love timers for preschoolers. We do a lot of 2-minute timers, but whatever timers you work for, 2 minutes always feels reasonable to me. I'm like, I can wait 2 minutes for this. And so we do a lot of Alexa plays only 2-minute timers in our house. But 2 minutes to run in circles as much as you can, or like you said, that we're doing a lot of walks too, and that the walks, the bike rides early enough can make a big difference. The other thing you can do, which I don't love to talk about as much, because I'll say this first, is always what I do love to talk about is focusing on the positive, right? So positive reinforcement. At preschooler age, they love to get rewarded for doing the right thing, right? So the more that we can help them with understanding that we are really proud of them for when they don't have that behavior, so the behavior we don't want to see, the more likely they're going to do that behavior we do want to see, right? And I think a lot of parents get nervous about positive reinforcement or giving some sort of surprise. It doesn't have to be a toy. It doesn't have to be candy. It doesn't have to be money. It doesn't have to be any of those things. It could be as simple as, all right, they know it's bedtime or you're getting ready for bed, and you can tell them, if you guys can be quiet and do your bedtime routine, so making it sure it's short and simple and easy for them to follow, a bath or shower, bathroom routine, 1 or 2 books, and into bed. If they can do that calmly and quietly, then in the morning they get something special. And that something special could be a dance party. It could be getting to have breakfast outside for a picnic. It could be getting to have breakfast in the living room instead of at the table. It could be something super simple that they can get right away, that again doesn't have to be. It can't, if you want to do candy and toys and things like that, that can work. But a lot of times that can get harder to do long term. But those things that they're really going to appreciate, even if it's just you get extra, 5 minutes of just mom time or dad time, or 10 minutes of just time to do whatever you want, putting their phones away, which reminds me, it's a good point to touch on too. That kind of positive reinforcement can make a big difference for those kiddos. Because then what I was going to say that I don't like to talk about is if they're not doing it, they know that the consequence, which sometimes we do have to consequence behavior, especially if it's affecting their health, right? The consequence can be not getting that thing, that special thing in the morning, or it could be not getting something else that's a part of their bedtime routine. Maybe they really do like reading the books and they weren't quiet, so they don't get a book that night. And that kind of positive reinforcement that you're focusing on with the consequences for when they're not doing it can actually help get them on track. Those things also paired with, so I talked about the routine for the chart for their routine. Preschoolers and toddlers love charts. So kind of pairing that with a reward chart. So having a sticker chart that says how many times they completed their bedtime routine calmly. And maybe, at the end of a week, they get something else that's special, ice cream date or something like that. Can also help them kind of track and see how well they're doing and notice the rewards for their positive behavior. That can make a big difference.
Thank you.
All right.
And let's after this question, let's just take a few minutes and talk about adults, for those adults who aren't sleeping either, of all ages.
Yeah.
I have so many questions. I think I just need my own private session, but okay, I have a 9-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a almost 18-month-old. They are all terrible sleepers. It's probably all my fault, but I have 2 questions. One is, how do you feel about melatonin for kids to take? My older son takes melatonin probably for the last year or so. It's been a game changer with getting him to bed. My 7-year-old refuses to take it, even though it's a gummy. She just decided it tastes bad. But I'm curious long term, like how you feel about using melatonin. And my other question is how to get an 18-month-old and a 7-year-old to share a room.
That is our own session. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
But we can do. Well, I'll touch on it briefly. But the melatonin I do want to talk about, so I'm glad that you brought that up. Melatonin can definitely have its role, right? There are definitely places where melatonin works well. Adults, I know a lot of adults, myself included, have taken melatonin because what melatonin does, as I touched on earlier, our body naturally secretes that hormone. So when we take it, it allows our body to be able to fall asleep more peacefully. So the biggest thing melatonin is great for is falling asleep more easily. It works really well for kids. Research shows, I should say, that it works really well for kids on the autism spectrum. So that's where I see it be something that can actually work long term. Pediatricians recommend it, and that can be a really big game changer. If it's being used in a kiddo who doesn't have those issues, my only concern, especially if it's long term, is that one, there hasn't been studies done on how it affects developing bodies that are taking that melatonin more long term. So I get a little weary about using something that we're not necessarily sure how it affects our kiddos. But also, it's not really a long-term fix, and it doesn't help with overnight sleep. So what I see with a lot of kids who parents will be like, well, I've been giving them melatonin, but we're still seeing all those issues. They might fall asleep really well, but a lot of times we still see those overnight issues because the melatonin wears off and they don't have those independent sleep skills that they need to get themselves back to sleep in the middle of the night. So we still see overnight wakings. We still see mornings, early mornings. And so I always work without melatonin. Again, the only kiddos I work with it are those that are on the autism spectrum if a pediatrician has recommended it. But even a few of those kids that I've had, we've been able to get them off of melatonin, even those kiddos with their work with their pediatrician. So I don't love it for long term. If it's something, if right now, let's say if parents are using it right now, especially for during this pandemic time, if you're just having issues getting them to sleep, it's not the worst thing at all. Sometimes we all, especially for us adults, we need a little bit of help just falling asleep and kind of getting that. What you can do to help your body produce melatonin on its own more naturally, there are 2 things. One is turning off your electronics. So for adults and kids alike, having all electronics, all screens off at least an hour before bed makes a huge difference, because our phones, our laptops, our TVs, they all emit blue light, and blue light inhibits the production of melatonin in our bodies. So when we're staring, and I am the worst culprit of this because I stare at my phone until I fall asleep, and then I can't fall asleep. And I'm sitting there thinking, I know my body's trying to produce melatonin and I didn't let it, right? So an hour before turning off all electronics, especially for our kiddos, it will help your body then produce melatonin naturally so that when you get in bed, you're ready to fall asleep peacefully on your own. The other thing that you can do is not only turning off electronics, but keeping your sleep environment completely pitch black. Another one that a lot of people don't think about. And I'm not talking about like, oh, it's pretty dark in here. I mean, not seeing your hand in front of your face, pitch black, especially for our kiddos. Using blackout curtains, using blackout shades, making sure going into your own room or your kiddo's room and looking around and seeing where are their lights? Are there lights coming from a humidifier, from a TV, from a fire alarm, any of those types of things, and covering them up, because those lights also inhibit the production of melatonin. And so those things can make it much harder to fall back asleep in the middle of the night, or can actually pull us out of a sleep cycle while we're sleeping, where our kiddos are sleeping, and make it harder for them to get back to sleep. So I would rather do those types of things and work on independent sleep skills than taking melatonin for a long-term solve, if that helps. So I'm not sure if that helps answer your question. And then for the 18-month-old and the 7-year-old, sharing a room, letting them have their own space. Most likely you're going to be putting your 18-month-old to bed first, depending on how they're doing, and putting them to bed, and then having your 7-year-old come in, you know, within their first sleep cycle, within that first hour, so if the baby is fully asleep, can work really well. At 18 months, we also see okay to wake clocks work really well, starting more closely to 2, but at 18 months you could start to do that. And so you could have some sort of clock in there that your 7-year-old could help the baby with, understand whether or not they should get up. Those types of things can help, but it really depends on what their own sleep situations are now. So how well they're currently sleeping. I like to see both kiddos sleeping well for at least 2 weeks before putting them together. So that way you're not kind of working with 2 kiddos that are having issues at the same time. But it can be done. It definitely can be done. And I've worked with families in that situation. So if you do have questions on that, we can always talk about it too separately.
So, Emily, we have a few more minutes before I wrap up. Tell us quickly, other than melatonin, which I used to take when I traveled a lot, and nothing helped in those days, but what else should adults think about? Because if the parents or the grandparents aren't sleeping, I don't think the kids do very well anyway.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. I touched on a couple of them. So the darkness is important. So making it dark, even in our own rooms, is really important. That also includes ditching the clock. So this is one that not only creates light in our room when we have those big alarm clocks in our room, but also for us anxious adults, myself included, if I have a clock and I can't go to a hotel room when they have the big clocks with the big red numbers, because if I can't sleep, we turn over, we see that clock and we think, oh, now I'm only getting 6 hours of sleep. Now I'm only getting 5 hours of sleep. Now I'm only getting 4 hours of sleep. You just ditch the clock. You don't need it in your room. If you have to have an alarm, excuse me. If you have to have an alarm, put it on your phone, and then put your phone in a drawer and don't touch it until the morning. You want to not have to look at the time, look at your phone. I'm telling myself this as much as I'm telling all of you, but putting your phone away and keeping it out all electronics out of the bedroom, out of the bed, as ideally as possible, will help you fall asleep more easily and sleep through the night. Also, making your bed, oddly enough, sounds like a crazy way to help yourself get to sleep, but research actually shows that people who make their beds feel less anxiety about having to hop into their bed later on. So there's a lot of research about people making their beds and how much more successful they are, but it does also help you sleep better. So make your bed every morning, so that way you feel a little bit less anxious about getting into it at night. And then finding your perfect temperature and humidity levels in your house, especially as we get into summertime. Our bodies do better in cooler temperatures. It actually goes back to melatonin. So we release more melatonin in cooler temperatures. So ideal temperatures for adults is usually somewhere between 60 to 68 degrees, and humidity levels around 30 to 50%. So you can control both of those things relatively easily with humidifiers and hopefully your thermostat. But that, I should also say that for kiddos, it's usually somewhere between 68 and 72 degrees. They might need it a little bit warmer for our youngest of kiddos. I should say more like infants, but 60 to 68 is a good temperature range. So we try to keep our house at 68 over here, but that can help being a little bit cooler.
Wow.
Yeah.
I really like the part about making the bed, but go on.
I know, I do too. My husband, I always tell him, I'm like, I'm doing this for us. You realize this is for our sleep. But getting a comfy mattress, making sure that you actually like your mattress. Another thing that we actually did right during the pandemic is ordered a new mattress. My husband was not sleeping well. I was sleeping fine, but he was not. And a new mattress made a world of difference for him. So making sure you take that time to prioritize the firmness, the materials that you have so that you're comfortable going to bed will also help you sleep better at night. Using white noise. So depending where you live, we're all out of the city, so we may not have as much noise, but even sometimes just having that more consistent noise, if your house makes noises overnight, using white noise to drown those noises out can help you sleep more consistently and fall asleep more easily. And then the very last thing that I had, especially for us adults, is taking care of ourselves. So I hinted at this with Monique. Give yourself lots of grace. This is a hard time. This is stressful. There's a lot going on for all of us. And I think each one of the moms, so Ayla, Melanie, and Monique all said something about, I may have done this myself. Don't put all the blame on yourself. They're kids. They're fine. They'll recover. We're in a very weird time right now, and we all need to give ourselves a lot more grace and flexibility and make sure that we're taking care of ourselves. So giving, whether it's going to get a cup of coffee on your own or taking a walk around the block by yourself, or just going and sitting in your bathroom for 10 minutes by yourself. If that's the only time you can grab, that is okay to take that time for yourself. And making sure that you prioritize that, because that can be hard to get these days. I feel like someone is always touching me between my 3-year-old and my 15-month-old or 16-month-old. So taking that time for yourself is really important. Additionally, journaling for everybody can be really important. So research actually shows that those people that do a gratitude journal before bed sleep better. So taking 5 minutes before you go to bed to just write down things you're grateful for recenters yourself, even when you've had a really hard day. To force yourself to think about things that you're grateful for can actually help you fall asleep more easily and sleep better overnight too.
I love that. I'm grateful for that, Emily. That's lovely.
Thank you, Shirley.
Thanks for reminding us. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Yep. One more question, if that's okay.
Sure.
If we want to get in touch with you after this, privately, because there's a lot going on, and if you could provide in the notes, or I don't know how.
I will.
We'll get
Let
some.
me share this now. Yeah, and I'll put this up right now just so you guys can see. I'll put this up before everybody jumps off. So there's my name and my phone number and my email address. But Shirley also has that information. So if any of you want to send her an email or email me directly, I have lots of handouts. I have lots of graphics. I have lots of things that I can just send your way if you want to take a look at something that I mentioned. And I also always start with every family I work with about a 15 to 30 minute free evaluation where we just talk about what's going on, talk about how I work with families, what my plans look like, and all that kind of thing. If you wanted to work out together. Yeah. Cool.
Monique, we'll make this available. We'll work with Heather and to make sure all the preschool families can get this. And we will put it in Shomrei Week. And we also will put this talk up so people can listen to it at their leisure. I saw Lynn Rubin jumped off and she said, sleep well, everyone. Just to tell you what's coming down. Again, Emily, thank you so much. And Linda wants the breathing exercises. Okay, that's good too. So we'll work on that. Next week, we're moving out of children, but this is, adults are invited and you can bring your babies again. Matt Purdy who is one of the deputy managing editors of the New York Times and another member, will speak on a pandemic, a protest, and a newspaper produced from home, covering world-shattering news with no one in the newsroom. So that should be fun. And the week after, June 23rd, we're coming back to our children. And Aviva Shine is going to speak. She's a pediatrician, and she's going to speak on when is it safe to let the children out. And really what we're going to be looking at is not just the children, but how can we assess the risks as the world opens up a little bit. So Matt next week, Aviva the week after. Again, Emily, many, many thanks. It's been great to meet you this way, and we hope to meet you in person someday. Thanks.
Yes, we will all be back soon. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. And look at the thank yous are all in the chat. So bye, everyone.
Bye. Thanks, Shirley. Bye, guys.
Welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
And Adrian, I'll let you shut it down wherever she is.